The Chicago Bears have the first pick of the NFL draft for the second straight season. This time via the trade that they made from last year's first overall pick. The question on everybody's mind is, what should they do with it? Well, today I'm going to explore the three options that this team has for the first overall pick. But before we do that, I am going to ask you to like the video, subscribe for more in-depth content like this, and go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the intro out of the way, I'd like to say hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today we're talking about the Chicago Bears and the first overall pick. Basically, there are three options for the Chicago Bears with the first overall pick. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about all three of them. But basically, they boil down to draft someone other than Caleb Williams at number 1, draft Caleb Williams and trade Justin Fields, and or trade back from number 1, draft someone else, and keep Justin Fields. The first scenario that we are going to discuss, which we are not going to be spending a whole lot of time on, is going to be staying at 1 and drafting someone other than Caleb Williams or a quarterback, and instead taking Marvin Harrison Jr., because in the event of a trade down, you are likely going to be out of position to get Marvin Harrison. So I think Marvin Harrison is absolutely fantastic. I think there's a very strong case that you could make that he is the best wide receiver prospect since Calvin Johnson. That being said, I think there are two other wide receivers that I would also put in that conversation in this draft class. I don't necessarily think it's a slam dunk Marvin Harrison is the best receiver in this class. I think he's absolutely outstanding. I think he's likely a Pro Bowler in year 1 and someone who could absolutely have 100 receptions for 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns his rookie season. However, I think Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze very clearly, in my opinion, also have that kind of potential in them. I think that's a legitimate conversation to have. Depending upon what you like from your wide receivers, what you already have on your team, I don't think it's unreasonable to have any one of those three wide receivers be the wide receiver 1. And by the way, for Chicago, if I was the Chicago Bears, Marvin Harrison wouldn't even be my wide receiver 1. It would be Rome Odunze, because they already have the deep threat and the guy that can kind of be shifty and make you miss in DJ Moore. So I think what Rome Odunze brings to the table, which is a genuine X-receiver alpha type who's fantastic in contested catches situations while also still being really good with the ball in his hands, that's just a bonus. But I think what Rome Odunze brings to the table for this offense is something that they don't already have. Now, drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. would not be a bad pick, but I don't think he's the clear number 1 wide receiver. And I think they might be better situated if they were to either trade up a little bit from 9 or just stick at 9 and take one of the other two guys that I think are neck and neck. Statistically speaking, this is also the one that provides you the least amount of value. The fact of the matter is that if you re-sign Darnell Mooney and then you still have DJ Moore under contract for a few years, the receiving core is solid. And Cole Kmet played at a borderline Pro Bowl caliber year this year. He looks like he's finally taken that step into being a really good tight end in the NFL level that a lot of people thought he was going to be. So the receiving core is not that bad. Could you add a piece or two? Yes, but it's not that bad. You have a genuine wide receiver 1 in the NFL in DJ Moore and a quality second and third option. So adding another really good piece there is not going to help you as much as drafting another position, just from like an analytical perspective. And there's also something that has to be brought up here, which is Justin Fields. He's either been hurt or ineffective for the most part. He did have that 5 or 6 game stretch this year towards the end of the season after he came back, where he did look like someone who could end up being a franchise quarterback. And if this was year 1 or year 2, I would be inclined to stay with Justin Fields. But this isn't year 1 or year 2. he's entering year 4. And that means that you have only 2 years of affordable quarterback play before you have to pay him and ultimately make some decisions about the rest of the roster. So I don't think this is A, realistic for all of the reasons that I've talked about, or B, a good idea. If they stay at 1 and take Marvin Harrison, I genuinely think that would be a mistake, even though there's a very real possibility that Marvin Harrison has like a maybe the best receiving year that a rookie's ever had in the NFL. What you gain from that is not enough to justify the selection in my mind. Now, if this was the Carolina Panthers and they have absolutely nothing at wide receiver, this would be a different conversation. But that isn't the case. You do have 3 solid options and 1 elite option. Well, you have 2 solid options and 1 elite option. So I don't think wide receiver or pass catcher is that big of a need for this team. So for all of the reasons that I've kind of talked about here, I don't believe that this would be the best course of action for this team. Option number 2 is the one that I would go with. I would stay at 1. I would take the best QB in the draft and maybe the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck in Caleb Williams, and then look to trade Justin Fields to a team that missed out on one of the top 3 quarterbacks. That could potentially be a team like Atlanta. That could potentially be a team like Denver or maybe even the Saints. However, I don't really know if those teams or really any team is going to be able to or willing to give up a first-round pick for Justin Fields. I think that's likely a long shot unless something else is packaged with Justin Fields, like maybe a second-round pick or something like that, and then you move up into the middle of the first round. But that's not very realistic, and I also just don't think a team would be willing to do that. We'll talk more about a potential Justin Fields trade in a moment, but I think you should stay at 1, and I think you should take Caleb Williams for 2 reasons. Number 1, Caleb Williams's floor as a prospect, in my opinion, is at this point Justin Fields' ceiling as a player in the NFL. So I think worst case scenario, Caleb Williams is going to be as good as Justin Fields was during that 5-game stretch towards the back end of this past season. I think that's worst case scenario. And if you get quarterback play like that, you can make the playoffs, and depending upon the pieces that you have around him, maybe even make a run. And that's worst case scenario. The second reason is that it resets the QB clock, okay? So what that means, or what I mean by that, is you now have 4 to 5 years of affordable quarterback play as opposed to 2, meaning that you have time to fill out the rest of the roster. And maybe you don't make the playoffs next year. Maybe you do. I actually think you have a very good chance with Justin Fields and perhaps another wide receiver in the second or with your second first-round pick to make the playoffs next year. And potentially with the way the defense has been playing, assuming you can get some key pieces back in free agency, I think you could legitimately make a run at not only making the playoffs, but winning the NFC North as well. Now, as far as the specifics for trading Justin Fields, I do believe that there is a solid chance that you can get multiple day 2 picks for him. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. But I think if you're going to trade him to a team potentially like Atlanta or maybe the Giants or somebody else like that, that early second-round pick is likely probably going to be the only day 2 pick that they offer. So you could look at something like the Giants' second and fourth-round picks in this year's draft class. And I don't think that would be bad value. I think Justin Fields' value as a player right now is probably equivalent to a late first-round pick, but I don't think any of the teams that are going to pick between 28 and 32 are going to be interested in trading for Justin Fields. So getting a early day 2 pick and a potentially early day 3 pick is probably the best case scenario for trading Justin Fields. And if I'm being entirely honest with you, in this draft class, which is loaded with talent at the wide receiver and offensive tackle positions, I'm cool with adding another early second round pick so that I can get another player of potentially a first round caliber and a little bit of a weaker positional class for that position. Now, just for fun here, let's run with this scenario for a second. What about pick 9 here? We take Caleb Williams at 1. We've traded Justin Fields for an early second round pick. What about pick 9? Well, this is what I would probably do. I would try to trade up potentially with a team like the Chargers or maybe the Giants if the 3 quarterbacks are off the board, which they likely will be. And maybe I offer that early second round pick that we just got from Justin Fields, and I move up from 9 to 5. And I get to then take my wide receiver, probably 1, which would be Rome Odunze for this team, or for most people, wide receiver 2 or 3. Maybe you take Malik Neighbors. Maybe you like him more. Maybe you want Brock Bowers. I don't know. But I think trading up for a weapon is potentially the way to go. However, I'm not sure I would do that. I think there's a solid chance one of the 2 wide receivers falls to 9, and if they don't, I'm fairly confident Brock Bowers will be there. And if Brock Bowers is gone, then I'm almost positive that one of the 2 offensive tackles, Olu Fashanu or Joe Alt, who I have with top 10 grades, are going to be there. And I think potentially taking someone like Joe Alt might help this team more than a wide receiver. So I would actually be somewhat interested maybe in either trading up to get Rome Odunze or standing pat and hoping Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu fall to me. That's probably what I would do. If I could trade up to 5 if Marvin Harrison goes 4 like we all think he's going to go, and I have intel that maybe the Giants are looking to go wide receiver while the Chargers are kind of thinking tackle. So maybe you call the Chargers up and be like, hey, I'll give you this extra second round pick. Let me move up to 5 so that I can take a player I want to take. And if that's the intel, then I could be convinced to do it. If that isn't the intel and we're thinking the Chargers are probably going to take a wide receiver at 5, I think you would probably be better off just staying put at 9 and hoping that one of the other 2 wide receivers that are likely to go off the board falls to 9, or to then take a foundational piece in the trenches in Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu. Now, moving on to the third option, these are the more realistic options than option number 1, at least in my opinion, okay? So you keep Justin Fields and you trade number 1 for a haul of draft picks. We're going to go through the 3 teams that I think are the most likely to try and trade up to number 1. I think you could make an argument that the Patriots at 3 might be interested in trading up at 1, but me personally, I'm not willing to trade back to just 3. Because you're either going to sit there with the 3rd quarterback, which I would still probably take, and if I'm going to take a quarterback, then why would I trade number 1? So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And if I'm not going to take a quarterback, why would I only trade back to 3 and get a lot less draft capital than I would for trading back even to just 6 and then still having an opportunity to take the best tackle or the second best wide receiver in this draft class? The first scenario that we're going to talk about here is a trade with the New York Giants. And in this scenario, the Giants give the 6th overall pick, the 37th overall pick, a 2025 first-round pick, and a 2025 third-round pick, along with a 2026 second-round pick for the first pick of the draft. I don't particularly think, unless you trade to like 8 or worse, that we're talking about 3 first-round picks here. According to the trade value chart that I use, the first pick of the draft is 3,000 points. The 6th pick of the draft is 1,600. The 37th pick of the draft is 530. An average first-round pick is 1,000, and an average third-round pick is 190, along with an average second-round pick, which is 400. So in terms of value, you add all of that up, and you're about 500 points above the value of the first overall pick. And that's a good haul. And it could be exponentially better than that if the Giants suck next year, in which case you could then have another top 5 pick while competing for the playoffs. God knows the Giants need a hell of a lot more than just a quarterback in order for them to be good. There's also a significant possibility that Caleb Williams doesn't even start the year as the starting quarterback because they're paying Daniel Jones $40 million plus a year, so they might as well throw his ass out there until it's very evident that he isn't the guy, and then they throw Caleb out there. So there is a pretty good chance that the Giants end up having a top 10, maybe even top 5 pick in next year's draft class as well. So that is, I think, part of the reason why you're not getting that third first round pick and instead it's just a second round pick. But mainly it's because I think at 6, you still have the opportunity at likely tackle 1 or wide receiver 2. So I think that in this year's draft class is worth not getting the extra first round pick. Next trade offer that we're going to talk about here is the Atlanta Falcons. And in this trade, I have Atlanta giving up 8, 43, 79, a 2025 first, and a 2026 first round pick for the first pick of the draft and a 2025 third round pick. So once again, according to the draft value chart that I use, the first overall pick is worth 3,000 points, and the average third round pick is worth 190. So we'll call it 3,200 in value going out. And the Atlanta Falcons, with the 8th pick, are giving us 1,400. With the 43rd pick, they're giving us 470, and with the 79th pick, they're giving us 195. So for simplicity here, that is worth 2,065 points. I've already established that a 2025 first round pick is worth about 1,000 points. It's a future pick. It could end up being worth more or less. However, with Atlanta and the roster that they have, I think it's far more likely that ends up being below 1,000 points in value. So between the 2025 first round pick and the 2026 first round point, I think that value speaking, that's worth somewhere around 800 and then maybe like 700 for the 2026 first round pick. So you add those two together, you get 1,500. So incoming, the Bears would have 3,565, and outgoing, they would have 3,200 effectively. So again, that's a nice little gain in value here. So I do think that would be a fair trade. And more than that, I think this draft class has a tremendous amount of depth. So you could get a starting or contributing wide receiver at 43 and maybe a offensive or defensive contributor at 79, along with picking up 2 extra first round picks to potentially package in future trades to go and get a final piece or something like that. The final trade that I'm going to discuss here is one that is not very realistic, I think, in my opinion. I'm never in any scenario trading this pick to the Minnesota Vikings. However, I know that most GMs in the NFL don't think like that. They think, what can I get from this team in terms of value, and the fact that they're in my division doesn't matter at all, which is why you still see in division trades, even in the first round. However, just for fun, let's take a look at this and what I think the Vikings would offer and what I would probably take here. So in this scenario, the Vikings are going to give the 11th pick of the draft, the 42nd pick of the draft, the 130th pick of the draft, and a 2025 first, a 2025 third, and a 2026 first round pick for number 1 and a 2025 fourth round pick. So going out, we have the 3,000 points for the number 1 overall pick and the average fourth round pick, which is worth 60 points. So effectively, you have 3,060 points going out. And 11 is worth 1,250 coming in. 42 is worth 480 coming in, and 130 is worth 40 coming in, leaving us with 1770 and the 2025 first round pick, which I'm not going to attribute an average value to because I think the Vikings are a good football team, and with Caleb Williams, I think they would almost certainly make the playoffs. So I'm going to instead attribute 700 points to the 2025 first and 700 points to the 2026 first. So that's another 1,400 points. And an average 2025 third round pick is worth 190, giving us 3,360 coming in and 3,060 going out. So that's a net of 300 points of value, which is decent. Roughly speaking, that's the equivalent of a late second round pick in terms of value gain. I don't particularly think I would take this one. I think probably the best one and the one that I would take is the Giants, because I don't think the Giants are a quarterback, even someone who potentially is a transcendent level talent in Caleb Williams. I don't think that that is a team that makes the playoffs next year. So I think betting that that pick is going to be a good pick is the way that I would go. Kind of like what you did with the Carolina Panthers in this past offseason, and also only falling back to 6th overall as opposed to 8th or 11th. I'm pretty much guaranteed either tackle 1 or wide receiver 2. So I would go that way. I would probably take the Giants route if they offered that. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. It's at this point I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.